Yo, Jonathan here. It's been a minute. Over 396,000 minutes to be specific, or over 275 days since I last uploaded, and if I'm being honest, I didn't think I'd ever make a video again. I've been on this multi-year roller coaster with shingles that got into my right eye, caused scarring, but then came back and caused even more scarring, so this time it was more intense. It was more central this time, and therefore it bled into the pupil, which impacted vision even more. So if you look at this, that is all scarring, and those two circular ones here are the newest and most problematic. So if we scrub through the different layers of the cornea, it's actually more inward and less exterior, which makes things even more complex. There's really not much you can do with a scar either. Options like laser or surgery are out of the question because that's almost a surefire way to make things even worse. So absolutely a 0 out of 10 do not recommend, but that scarring actually turned out to be the least of the problems. I've been scared to make this video. I've been scared to ask for help, but this is me asking for help. Part 1 of that help is just to simply listen and watch. If there was ever a video of mine that you watched from start to finish, this is it. Every word, every frame, every second of this video means everything to me because one of those problems outside of the scarring that I dealt with was memory loss. I've worked and struggled and worked relentlessly to try and articulate and visualize and explain what this last 10 months has been like because I don't think hell could really even begin to describe it. If you've ever had one of those dreams where your teeth get knocked out or you get into an accident, but somewhere in the back of your mind, you know it's just a dream, so you wake up, this was like that, except I couldn't wake up and I was trapped for 10 months with no escape. From what I've been able to gather so far, shingles impacted and hit multiple cranial nerves, including 6, 10, and 12, and either I had a mini stroke at some point or there was enough neuroinflammation to cause brain trauma. So memory loss, confusion, disorientation, spatial awareness problems, ocular motor dysfunction, diplopia, aka double vision, photophobia, and to make things even more fun because why not, also found out I had a couple bulged discs and a pinched nerve in my neck, which resulted in this perfect dysfunctional cocktail that not even Walter White could outdo. So question time, are those two things related? No. The best way I could describe this is imagine two cars slowly traveling over time and then colliding at the worst possible moment. I've always been able to view life and memories very linearly. So whether something happened 2 months ago, 6 months ago, 2 years ago, or 10 years ago, I could always pinpoint them out in time. But this time, it was like everything was just shoved all the way to the end on a single plane and I couldn't really make anything out. At its worst, I remember driving up to a street that I grew up on, somewhere I've been thousands of times, and I was confused and did not know which way to turn. I ended up going the wrong way, had no sense of direction. It was terrifying, and even my own mom looked like a stranger. So yeah, I lost every part of me. Video, music, guitar, my team, career, my office, which I'll talk about, but worst of all, my mind. It was taken and I was trapped inside, frozen with just enough awareness to know that this wasn't it. What I think hurt the most is that it took me away from being the person I needed to be for the people I cared about most. So I know I let people down and I am forever sorry. I've always thought of myself as a visual person, especially dealing with these eye problems, but I've also realized it's one thing to not be able to physically see with your eyes, but when you can't see with your mind, when you can't dream, when you can't hear a melody in your head, when you can't see faces, when you can't remember your dad, your childhood, your memories, and no matter how hard you try, it's just empty, that is hell. So back to my eyes for a second. It's kind of really hard to explain, but let's look at things like a camera. So my eye in the scarring is kind of like the glass on a camera lens, and then the muscles and nerves are like the focus ring. Finally, we have the sensor or the processor, aka my brain, and all three are messed up. The scarring, since it bleeds into the pupil, yes, does impact visual acuity, but it also leads to things like ghosting, haloing, starburst, and double vision on both text and objects. The other fun thing with pupils is the lower the light is, the more they expand and get bigger, which just amplifies everything. But again, that scarring was the least of the problems. So cranial nerve 6, also known as the abducens nerve, is one of 12 cranial nerve pairs that connects directly to your brain, and in this case, from the lateral rectus muscle in your eye. Palsy just simply means a form of full or partial paralysis, so I couldn't move my right eye correctly. So that sixth cranial nerve sends signals from your brain to that muscle, and unlike other cranial nerves though, it's not supported by the dural wall, so that means it can be easily damaged by trauma or inflammation. As far as what could cause that, there are a multitude of things, but the most common are stroke, infection, or elevated pressure inside the brain. So I couldn't physically move my eyes together or properly. Again, there is still the scarring, but where things get really nasty is the brain. This by far was the hardest to articulate and demonstrate, but here we go. This is how we technically see everything in life. One object in our left eye, one in our right, and then our brain is supposed to take those two images and perfectly fuse them together as one. So imagine in Photoshop, these two bitches aren't lining up, and therefore my eyes and brain are constantly doing this. So in this case, when it's just slightly exterior, that is blurry vision, and when you get extreme, that is double. So in a nutshell, my visual system was overloading my brain and then causing my central nervous system to shut down, which is also 0 out of 10 do not recommend. We are not done yet though. Remember, there are 12 cranial nerves and it also hits 10 and 12. Cranial nerve 10 is the vagus nerve, which would explain things like tachycardia. My heart rate would get locked at 110 resting, so I was just constantly in this fight or flight state. Cranial nerve 12, aka the hypoglossal nerve, controls tongue movement, so there would be times where I couldn't mentally speak, but I also couldn't physically. It was like I was trapped and frozen and couldn't get anything out. And one of the things I heard a lot was, just take your time and reach out when you're ready. So imagine hearing that, knowing that you do need help, but you can't express or articulate that. The other thing that I heard was, yo, sorry about that I do, but that must make your ears and music better, right? No. It took that away too. Honestly, it was kind of like someone placed a low cut and a high cut filter on my brain. I couldn't perceive low end, I couldn't perceive high end, I couldn't process or absorb music. It kind of felt like this. Couldn't exercise, I couldn't look at my phone, I couldn't watch TV, I couldn't play guitar. I didn't want to stay in bed all day, so I tried to walk, but it was just this endless loop of hell that repeated every single day. I had to play games with myself where I'd get up, see if I could make it to 11 a.m., then 1 p.m., 3 p.m., 5 p.m., 7 p.m., and if I made it to 9 p.m., then I could finally lay down, go to sleep, and then do it all over again. There's no way around it. Things got really dark, and I often wished that I had a time machine, not to be able to go back in time and change things, but just to see a year from now if I'd still be here. I truthfully didn't see a way out, and it wasn't from a lack of wanting to be here. I just wanted peace because it hurt to be awake and it hurt to be asleep. The brain stuff was by far the worst, but the pain was a close second. And remember that bulged discs and pinched nerve? Well, apparently when you throw that into a Vitamix with shingles and nerve damage, things get really fun. Neuropathy, occipital neuralgia, ligament damage, ligament weakness, trigger point knots, reduced blood flow, nerve flow, crazy inflammation, and did I mention pain? At its worst, it felt like someone took a screwdriver that was on fire, jammed it into the back of my skull. It ran down my neck into my trap, but then also went up around my ear and then into my eye from the inside where it felt like it was being scraped and pulled. I could not turn my head left or right. I was terrified to sneeze. Laying on a pillow hurt, and I was scared to go to sleep because 1 inch the wrong way would set things up even worse the next day. Probably the lowest point of all this was in February where things were just getting worse, and it was a situation where time definitely was not healing all. I had seen multiple doctors, multiple specialists, including 3 different neurologists who all concluded that this was most likely anxiety, told me to work on my mental health, and then prescribed anti-anxiety and anti-depression medication. I remember begging and pleading with the last neurologist, like, let's just order an MRI. Something feels wrong in my neck, but they said, there's really not a point, we're not gonna find anything. So after a certain point, you start to believe them. I remember being in so much mental and physical pain that it got to the point where my mom offered me heavier painkillers, which is something she would never do. I remember trying to explain to her, Mom, it's not the pain. I can deal with pain, but my mind is gone. And I didn't want to take anything that was going to take me further away from what little I was holding on to. So I think seeing my mom both helpless and hopeless just kind of broke me. I knew I had to figure it out for her, but I didn't know how. The idea of going through more doctors, more specialists, more blood tests, more neurologists just to be told that it was in your head sounded so impossible. I ended up finding an amazing primary care doctor, Dr. Ardeshana, and he was the first doctor to listen and said, "This sounds like more than anxiety."
I remember I seeing you first time, your face, there was no happiness, there was nothing, and you were all sad. And now I see on your face smile. That's what gives me happiness, and that's my satisfaction more than anything.
So he ordered blood panels and, more importantly, an MRI. That MRI changed my life. He called me a couple days later and said, "There's definitely some problems going on. The report is showing some bulged discs, degeneration, and a pinched nerve, so I'd recommend going and finding a spine surgeon or specialist," and I did. The spine surgeon did confirm those problems and said that while I may need surgery eventually, it's best to try and avoid it, and that if I could, try finding an upper cervical neck chiropractor, and specifically someone that specialized in Blair. I will be the first to admit, the word chiropractor scared the shit out of me. But this was coming from a spine surgeon, so I checked it out. It looked different than the traditional cracks and pops and ring dinger videos that you see across TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. I was desperate though and willing to try anything because up until this point, I didn't have a single answer. This is the part of the story where it sounds like a miracle is about to happen, but it didn't. I found a doctor in LA who I'm not gonna name because I don't think he's inherently a bad doctor, but he was a bad doctor for me. He ended up doing multiple adjustments per week, which seemed to contradict the ideology of Blair chiropractic and everything that I had looked up and learned. I would bring things up like, "Hey, I think it's more than just my neck. There's something wrong in my trap and in my eye that's impacting my range of motion," and he would just kind of dismiss it. After about 2 weeks, he was visibly frustrated with me and told me that I should be making more progress than I was, and that most patients by this point were making more progress. With that frustration, he made a noticeably more aggressive adjustment that really just seemed to make things worse. It was bad, and I just remember sitting in my car in the parking lot just crying because I didn't think anything would work. Every single night, I would fall asleep to YouTube videos looking and searching for any kind of answer, help, or hope. I ended up stumbling upon Dr. Kevin Pecca, and a couple of things he talked about really hit home.
It's like the Twilight Zone. Every day is the worst day of your life, and you can't figure out why.
That was me. But the next thing really hit me. He was at his lowest point and woke up not wanting to be here anymore. He decided to push through, saw a priest, and was surprised with what the priest told him. The priest said, "There's not a prayer or a Hail Mary that's going to save you. You have to go out and find the person that went through what you're going through, figure out how they beat it, and then do that. Or if you can't find that person, be that person." Shortly after that, I was falling asleep to one of his podcasts with Dr. Elizabeth Hoefer, who happened to be in Southern California. What stood out to me was her interest in neurology, functional neurology, and that she integrated MRIs into her findings, so I decided to ditch the doctor in LA and give this a chance. March 12th. That was the day that I still couldn't speak, so I wrote Dr. Hoefer this letter. I'm gonna pause for a second though, because you're probably wondering at this point, where did those neck problems come from? To be honest, I'm not 100% sure. It might have been when I was in high school and wanted to be a WWE wrestler because, fun fact, I wanted to be a WWE wrestler, and my wrestling name was Thrash. So it could have been that, it could have been sports. Again, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm so thankful for those neck problems because that's what led to so many amazing doctors. So the first goal with Dr. Hoefer was to get some pressure off the neck because what essentially was happening was this Spidey-Man showdown of my nervous system getting punched in the face twice by both my neck and all the fun brain shingle stuff. So if we could take some pressure off of the neck, it would give my nervous system a chance to reset, to rest, and more importantly, heal. And that's exactly what happened.
It feeds directly into your brain.
Crazy.
So when I touch there, it goes straight to your brain because the dura is all up in there, innervated by cranial nerve 5.
Got it.
So.
Yeah, and I feel it right to my eye.
Yeah. It's all connected, dude.
If the pain was at a 9 or a 10, it's currently at a 2 or a 3, maybe on any given day, sometimes a 4 or a 5 on an occasional shitty day, but it is so much better. So I couldn't sit here and wholeheartedly recommend a chiropractor or Blair Chiropractic to be specific, but what I can recommend is Dr. Hoefer and Well Connected, because honestly, she saved my life.
Where other philosophies may be that, oh, if we just do this, do one adjustment and see what happens.
Yeah.
I don't want to play with see what happens. I want to test it and ask it and be very confident knowing that's exactly what the body has said it needs, period.
I will also be the first one to say that the chiropractic care by itself would not have saved me. She also integrates PEMF, cold laser therapy, trigger point therapy, lymphatic drainage, all of which have been instrumental to my recovery. So Sherry, Lauren, Matt, thank you guys because you also helped save my life. Where things get really interesting though is the next part. Dr. Hoefer runs an absurd amount of functional neurological tests. One of those tests was a convergence test with my eyes that I failed. So I Google, what is convergence? I stumble across this video with Dr. Lamb at Insight Vision Center. I realize they're also in Southern California and randomly call and ask, do you guys do vision rehab in person? They said, yes, we do. Come on in, take a test. I came in, took that test, and failed with flying colors. My eyes wouldn't track together. I couldn't focus close or far. I was a disaster. So I ended up starting vision rehab, and as much as it is rehab for your eyes and muscles, it's actually more so rehab for your brain. It is intense. It is draining because you are quite literally rebuilding broken and damaged neural pathways. So shout out to my vision therapy coach, Nikki, who has been nothing short of incredible. Oh.
All right, very good.
Okay.
Okay.
But the green eye can see this one.
Okay.
The red eye cannot. So right eye cannot see this one, left eye can.
Oh my
And then
gosh.
it's the opposite for these.
Wow. I wish I could, will that work with, hold on. So, red, green, red can only see this part. And then we switch over to green. And then real life. Now, something that I didn't expect is alongside the vision rehab, they also specialized in scleral lenses, something that I looked into, something I tried, something I needed, but had ultimately struggled with. It turns out though, the scleral lens secret weapon was Dr. Schramm, AKA Nate Dogg. He was like, yo, I'm Nate Dogg and we can get you scleral lens precise down to 3 microns. They can help with things like higher order aberrations, could potentially help reduce scarring in your eye, and we can do so by doing a 3D mold of your eye. So what is a scleral lens? And I'm definitely going to dive deeper into this whole subject because it deserves one, but at its very basic surface level, it's a hard contact lens that vaults over the sclera, hence the name Scleral, and it can be helpful in a handful of situations, including scarring like myself, keratoconus, if things went wrong with LASIK, or even things like dry eye. So definitely drop a like if you want to see a detailed experience on that whole process because it has been insane, but it's also been incredible. And seriously, everybody at Insight, everybody at Well Connected are just leagues and bounds and just absurdly better than anything else I've ever experienced. So are things completely better and fully healed? No. I would say it feels like while I do still have one foot in hell, at least I have a foot out the door. And I would comfortably, confidently say I'm about 60% better, which is so much better than it was. It's still pretty much a full-time job rehabbing and getting better, but that was the thing though. Prior to getting answers, that was the worst part, the unknown, because I don't care what I have to do. If I have to drive 4 hours a day, if I have to eat grass or fish food, I'll do it. I'll be Kobe rehabbing his Achilles. Just tell me what to do. So where do we go from here? Like I said, things have been dark and grim and brutal and honestly just kind of a dumpster fire. You can imagine not working for about a year and what that would do and cause financially and also business-wise. I probably should be in a worse mood, but compared to how things were, those things kind of seem to not matter as much, but the reality is I'm pretty much starting over. As much as it burns my soul, I've kind of had to have a come to Korean Jesus moment and ask for help. I'm not worried about any of the debt or the fire behind me, but I do believe if I can get through this next step, I can make it out. I would say the costs of upcoming medical expenses and things like that are probably somewhere in the $20,000 to $25,000 range, which again burns my soul to ask for. I've set up two options, both a GoFundMe or a Patreon, which I think is probably going to sit better with me long term because at least I know I could give something back for that. Honestly though, this is my call out to any brands out there. If you know my work, if you like what I've done, let's not put this on anybody. Let's work together, let's make a cool story and figure things out. When I'm healthy and when I'm at the top of my game, I know I can make the best looking stuff on the internet because I care about it more than anybody. Apple, I'm calling you out. I look up to you as someone who makes the best creative, the best looking videos on the planet. And I think you've been inspired by some of my stuff. I'm laid back, but I don't front. So if you're a brand, I'll have an email linked in the description alongside the GoFundMe and Patreon. Hopefully we won't need those, but hit me up, let's work together. Outside of that, I'm actually really excited to get back and make videos, even if it's at a slower pace. I think naturally my lens and view on things has changed forever, but I'm ready to roll with it. I want to give a quick shout out to Brian Johnson, who is one of the channels I watched during the darker times, and I've kind of somehow turned into a mini version of Brian Johnson, just with the discipline and routine and supplement stack that I've kind of formulated. Just want to thank you for what you do, man, because it really gave me the extra discipline and motivation that I so desperately needed. Also want to thank Maven Huffman, who is absolutely destroying it on YouTube and has become one of my favorite channels. And again, that was one of the things that I held on to during the dark times. It was something I knew I could count on, gave me something to look forward to every Friday, and really just try to keep my mind busy, as hard as it was. And then we have this, the Judgment Day, which does hold a special place in my heart. As you already saw, I've been a huge fan of WWF, WWE, wanted to be a wrestler, and in that darkest period, this storyline was something that I latched onto. Seeing that in R-Truth, again, gave me something to come back for and to look forward to every week. And as stupid as it is, or was, also thank you to The Rock, Triple H, WWE, Cody Rhodes, Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins. What you guys did at WrestleMania was incredible. And that was something that I used to trick myself. I didn't have any answers, but I kept telling myself, this is interesting. I got to make it till WrestleMania. If I could do that, maybe things would turn around. And they did. Again, things aren't perfect, and I do want to emphasize that, yeah, there are some still seriously bad days, but in contrast, again, so much better. And my doctors have continued to ask me, as I continue to improve, what am I looking forward to most? And my answer is, dude, I just want to go to Sprouts. I just want to walk down a grocery aisle, throw some AirPods in, look at a label, and enjoy life. So thank you for listening to this. I don't even know how long of a video it is. It's long. My voice is giving out. I will definitely have a more detailed breakdown of everything involved with the doctors and the therapy. So definitely check out a link in the description for a new secret channel that will cover all that. For now, I didn't think I'd say it, but thank you guys for watching. This is Jonathan, and I'll catch you guys later.